You are listening to Unquestionable. I'm Dan Wu in the studio today with Dave Stoldt, the General Manager of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. How you doing this morning?
Doing great. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. And it's a little wet out there, a little, I guess, good weather for people working in the water business, huh?
Well, not really. We only get about 21 inches a year. We're very Mediterranean climate down there in Monterey. So it just all goes out to the sea.
All goes out to the sea? What do you mean by that? You don't have ways of catching the water? We'll go basic at the beginning.
Yeah, very little. We've got a little tiny dam called the Los Padres Dam and Reservoir, about 3,000 acre feet. An acre foot is a football field covered with a foot of water. So it's relatively tiny. During the course of a winter, in a regular year, about 50,000 acre feet flows out to the ocean. So we can't capture a lot of it. That's been our problem.
Now, I always wonder, just on the most basic sense, anywhere with a population of humans living, is the moment all that water hits roads and driveways, and I feel like I sound far away, but I think that's just me. I think it was my headphones. Anyways, I feel like all the water that hits our roads and just our civilization cuts down. We need water to run our civilization, but the fact that we build all these things to go along with our civilization drastically cuts down the amount of water that would have been used by animals, because it would have just hit the ground and they would have used it in the past.
Yeah, or recharged a groundwater basin or something like that, sure.
And also, because some of us care about the environment around here, we don't want to tap into all of the venues where water does flow into the ocean, such as in Santa Cruz, the San Lorenzo River. In the Monterey area, it's the Carmel River Valley. And so you're saying that about 90-something% of the water that comes through Monterey, you guys aren't able to tap into either for logistical or environmental reasons, correct?
Correct. We do have a little program called Aquifer Storage and Recovery where we do pump water from beneath the aquifer of the river when there is sufficient flow, and then we put it into the ground and pull it back out in the summer.
Now, with all of this as a backdrop of maybe the restrictions you guys have and a little bit basic bird's eye view right there of what the water system in Monterey looks like, a big development happened in November as far as water in Monterey's peninsula. So not all of Monterey County, but a substantial chunk of Monterey County. Would you like to talk about Measure J? And as the general manager of the water district down there, what does it mean for you guys? What does it mean for the people? And what parts of Monterey County can be affected, or can expect to be affected by that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in classic California governance by initiative, Measure J passed. And it's not the first time it's been attempted. And what Measure J in effect says is us, the public water district, should buy out the private assets of a private investor-owned water utility provider. It was attempted in 2014 and it failed by about 55% to 45%. This year it passed 56% to 44%, so big swing. It was tried in the 60s, it was tried in 1935. So this is the first successful municipalization of a private water utility out in our neck of the woods. So what we're really talking about are the 6 cities on the Monterey Peninsula and the unincorporated area of Carmel Valley and Highway 68. So we kind of pick up right about the southern edge of CSUMB. So what we're doing is similar to what Felton went through in the early 2000s. So Felton's not too far from Santa Cruz, and that was also a California American water system that the folks formed a little group called Felton Flow, which something about, well, you figure out what the FLOW stands for, but the end of it's water. We had a different group called Public Water Now, and they qualified this initiative for the ballot, and it passed.
Now, that's not the first attempt at that, even in the modern era. I was going to mention those other attempts at takeovers, like 1935 and in the early 60s and in the late 70s. But in very recent past, It was Measure O, and it was during a primary election, which
Yeah,
usually have
June.
lower turnouts. What made it different now? And you said it's a big swing because it was 55-45 against, and now it's approximately 55-45 for it. However, you as the general manager of the water district now have to deal with the fact of trying to put together these study sessions for whether it's feasible to take over from the private company, and also not act like 100 people voted for the buyout, or 100% of the people voted for the buyout. How do you balance kind of uniting the community when it is still very split? Like, we think of 56% as like a huge victory in an election, but that still means 44% of people voted against this buyout.
Exactly. And on both sides of the equation, you've always got that hardened base, right? You've got, let's assume, a good 20% of the people think that government can't do anything, and there's just no way you should vote in favor of a public buyout. And you've got another 20% on the other side who think that corporations are just in it for the profit motive, and if you get the profit out, it's got to be better. So there's a good, throw it at the wall, 40% of the population, you're never going to change their mind. So it was that middle group, and what happened, I think, between 2014 and now is water rates went up quite a bit. The satisfaction with how things were explained by the company, the current feeling about service being ignored and so forth, I think it just bubbled to the surface, and it hit at the right time.
Now, when you look at Cal American Water's literature online, I see this number of 600,000 people they say they serve all over the place. Monterey County alone, is about 500,000 people. So I would guess that when they say they serve 600,000 people, that sounds like a lot. But they're a national company, and they only serve 600,000 people. Are you one of the last communities that they serve?
Yeah, keep in mind, it's a California-based company,
but they're owned by a corporation,
a New Jersey-based corporation, exactly. And there's Illinois American Water, there's Pennsylvania American Water, there's New Jersey American Water. So these are subsidiaries to the parent American Water Works. Here in Monterey, it's about 100,000 customers that we're talking about. They also have services in Ventura County, Sacramento, Los Angeles, and San Diego. So that's where that 600,000 comes from. But, what are we, a state of 38 million people?
That's what I was thinking, is that when I was talking with, I spoke with Public Water Now last year during the election season before Measure J passed, and they threw out the number that 70% of the water in the United States is run and infrastructure is owned by public utility collectives, corporations. They're titled different things in different places, but that private water ownership is kind of as they saw it, sort of a 19th century oil baron type of
it's an anomaly
atmosphere for it.
Yeah, here in California, it's about 85% of all urban water is provided by public agencies, and that could be Santa Cruz, it's a department of the city government. Los Angeles, it's a Department of Water and Power. Here, there's special districts, so Soquel Creek Water District is a special district, but they're all forms of government, 85%.
And in most of those cases, they own the infrastructure at that point. With the Cal-Am water, it's interesting because Monterey's first water system that I could find in my research was actually set up by a hotel, that the Del Monte Hotel, that needed water for their customers and their place, and that they were so powerful and such a presence in the area that the cities turned to them later on to get their water. So it is a tale of private ownership up until now. And then Cal-Am Water is saying that you guys have to buy the infrastructure from them, which you guys have been basically leasing from them.
Or already paid for through rates once already.
But do they really have the right to sell infrastructure like that? And the comparison would be with Marin Energy and other companies that have set up gas and electric public utilities. PG&E comes in and says that they own the poles and the lines, but it's very arguable in a lot of these cases whether they actually paid for the installation of those in the past or if the government funding also helped pay for those, do they really own the infrastructure of the water? And do you guys really have to pay them for that? Or was it publicly set up?
Yeah. So the way it works is we have to pay for it. And even though many of the ratepayer groups will tell you it's already been paid for, I've paid for that through my rates, over time. The way the law works is we can either negotiate or take by eminent domain. And if your house isn't for sale, which Cal-Am's house is not for sale, then we're looking at eminent domain where we won't have very good information on the house. So putting a value on it is a big challenge. You end up going through the eminent domain process, which is in effect litigation. And so we'll be in the courts.
Now, I want to remind the listeners, you can call in at 831-459-4040 to join this conversation. We're on the air from like the southern tip of Los Gatos down to King City. If you live in Monterey County or you have an opinion on public versus private utilities, feel free to call in 831-459-4040 to pose your questions to Dave Stoldt, General Manager of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District, here in the studio at KZSE Santa Cruz. You can also text in, but please, please, please don't use SMS. Write some complete sentences so I don't sound foolish on the air. I'm an old person as far as that goes. I don't know most of the abbreviations, but I still put punctuation in my text messages. I'm sorry. I'm not being snotty with you. It's just what I do. But yes, we do have a call coming in. That sparked a call. I love it. Hello, you're on the air.
Hey,
and your radio's on. Hey, can you turn off your radio, please?
Yeah, I got it turned off now.
Thanks, man. What's up?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Hello.
Hello. I can hear you. This is a fun game.
Hey, I can hear you, but you can't. I can't hear you, but you can hear me.
Do you have your radio on? It's really echoey, man.
How about now?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. What's up?
I
Go
just
ahead.
wanted to say I'm really proud of the Monterey Peninsula Water District. I think they've really stepped up to the plate and kind of followed through with what the public has wanted, which was, to get rid of our water system, Cal-Am Water. It's a private utility that's been running our water system. And, I don't know if I really have a question as much as I would just like to say to Dave Stoldt that, as far as the feasibility of buying out Cal-Am, it's like I know a lot of customers feel the same way that I do, and that is like we just want to get rid of Cal-Am. They were going to bill us $350 million for this desal plant that I feel a lot of people feel was unneeded, too big.
Right.
Just trying to serve their own purpose.
Amen.
And, as far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't care if my bill went up 50%.
Hey, man, can you hear me? All right, thank you so much for the call. I'm only cutting you off. It was a little bit bad on the sound quality there. Almost as bad as my voice a moment ago. But, yeah, please, I'll work with you. I know cell phones. I know a lot of people are listening in their cars. If you can pull over. We love your calls, though. 831-459-4040. You can text in as well. Don't do either of those while you're driving. But if you happen to be in an office place where your coworkers are cool enough to have this station on, call us up as well. I don't know if that happens. They're probably listening to some other right-wing talk radio. But I personally believe that anything that everyone uses should not... anything that everyone uses, and I mean arguably everyone. There's some people that don't use water, I guess, or they have their own tank or their own well. I'm sure that happens. But when it's a public utility like electricity or gas or water or garbage pickup or building of freeways, I personally believe that it shouldn't be run by private companies. And when you talk about them not being for sale and the valuation of the company, they went and got themselves appraised during the election at $1.044 billion. It was a very exact number. That's 1,044 million for anyone out there trying to move that decimal. And then Public Water Now said that a general valuation of a utility would be 2 years of their revenue, which they guessed at 125 million. So they were saying more 250 million. And you're saying that they're not wanting to sell now. So you're going to have to force them possibly through eminent domain to do so. Where does that stand? What can the people of Monterey Peninsula expect? And can that have effects on other cities? Because it is kind of it's a piece of the county, but it's not, it's going to affect the whole county, but maybe not directly, right?
Yeah, it's more likely.
Wait, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's more likely to affect the industry. This is not part of the business model of the investor-owned utilities to lose their assets. And so it'll be fought, pretty tooth and nail. But, going back to our caller, I appreciate his comments and his thoughts, and, we'll do a pretty darn good job of evaluating this. But it's really a three-step process that I may have alluded to earlier, which is first you have to prove that it's feasible to take over. Then you have to go to a bench trial in front of a judge and say, why is it in the public interest to take over? And if the judge says, we find that it is in the public interest, then you go to a jury trial where you're dealing with valuation.
And that is never decided by the company or the customer in the sense of the district buying it. That is litigated, right?
It is litigated, exactly. And so, unfortunately for our caller and all the other people who feel just like him, that they just want to throw the bums out, if you will, that is not a factor that the judge will consider at the bench trial. And so you really do have to, sharpen your pencil, look at cost, look at quality of delivery of service, and look at governance. And if they determine that all of those kind of coalesce together, then they'll let you move forward to the valuation phase. So emotion is not a criterion upon which a judge is going to make a decision.
Emotion is, though.
Emotion is. Yeah, very, very good.
It's early in the morning, and you can call in to 831-459-4040 here at KZSE, a little different number than usual. So anyone that knows our number by heart, or like me, who has it in their contacts, it's 831-459-4040. You're listening to Unquestionable with myself, Dan Wu, and General Manager of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. Here in the studio, Dave Stoldt, answering questions and giving thoughts on the new state of water management in the Monterey Peninsula, which passed Measure J last election season, triggering a feasibility study of a possible takeover of the infrastructure in water on the Monterey Peninsula from California American Water. Now, Cal-Am was throwing out the talking point during the election that this would, for one, cost $1 billion to purchase, and that Measure J forced the purchase, that it was going to cost $1 billion, and that if you voted for Measure J, that the purchase was going to go forward, and that the people of Monterey Peninsula would be on the hook for $1 billion. Right. Now, the people pushing for Measure J said that it only started a study session, and that they were going to look at all of the factors involved, and that Measure J didn't for sure do anything. You're now in the middle of a bunch of listening sessions. Yep. With one tomorrow. If you'd like to give the location and time of that a couple times, that'd be cool. But where is the reality between those two statements about forcing a sale or just simply studying it?
Yeah, neither of them are quite true. So the initiative basically did three things. It said it created law, created rules and regulations, basically through public vote on an ordinance. The first of which is to make it a policy of our district that all water systems should be publicly owned. And it used the word if and when feasible to go pursue an acquisition to do so. Well, it didn't define what if and when feasible means. It didn't say do a feasibility study. It just said if and when feasible. I think the opponents to the measure said, well, that board, they're just going to go in a room and then come back out the door and say it's feasible. Early on, our board decided that, no, we need an objective measure, got to go get third-party consultants. We're going to do a feasibility study if it passes. So That was Part A. Part B says acquire all of the assets of California American Water through negotiation or eminent domain for the benefit of the district as a whole. Well, we've been told in many public forums they're not for sale, so we know we're heading down a path of litigation through eminent domain. The third piece was simply, in 9 months, prepare a report on how you're going to do so. So we just started this session. We've had 4 listening sessions. There's another one Tuesday night in Sunset Center, Carpenter Hall, at 6 o'clock. It'll run no later than 8 o'clock. They've all been running about a little over an hour to 90 minutes. They've been well attended. And we've had a dialogue where we're, in effect, asking people, tell us if you voted for it, why'd you vote for it, what in your mind is feasible? And we've had some really interesting commentary come back to us. We've had people say, hey, it's just like the caller, it's just worth it. I don't care if we don't get savings until 30 years. I'll pay more to get rid of the water company. And we've had others say, I need my bill to go down in the very first year and every year after that.
And if keeping Cal American Water does that, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So the other part we're listening on is, well, what do you see as in the public benefit? Because if it is, in fact, economically feasible and we move forward, well, then you have to start looking at building your case for the bench trial. Why should this be allowed to go forward? And so that's what we're asking people. And we've given them the opportunity to rank their preferences. This is more important to me. This is less important to me. And we're compiling all that data, if you will. To date, in the first 4, we had about 300 attendees, but only about 70 speakers. So not everybody's there to be heard. They're there to listen, to learn.
And how much do you estimate in the district the first steps of feasibility studies will cost? Because that's a whole other cost. Up here in Santa Cruz County, we've had a long history of talk about desalination plants, for example, and we have never gone through with one, but they've spent between $10 and $20 million just on the studies alone, which is a thing that exists.
The road
I don't
is
even
littered.
want to take an opinion on that.
No, the road is littered with studies that never came through. I mean, we at the district have looked at new dams in the middle of the river, new dams up further toward the headlands of the river. The voters turned down a dam. So you study things, you go through the Environmental Quality Act process, CEQA, and sometimes it doesn't make it past the finish line. That's just the nature of the business. It's very capital intensive. In our case, we're probably looking at somewhere between $300,000 and $700,000 for the studies. We're in the process of hiring eminent domain attorney, a valuation specialist, folks who can model the operations and maintenance of a entity, what we call cost of service specialists, investment bankers, Prop 218 attorneys. So we'll have an entire team in place, all of which will be parceling out different pieces of the work.
Just in case that comes up to someone and you throw Prop 218 into a conversation and it derails their request, enlighten people on what 218 attorneys have to do with this water takeover.
Right. So Proposition 218 was one of those initiative, governance by initiative processes back in time. And in effect, it said, you can't tax us without our permission. But revenue-driven entities like a water utility, a wastewater utility, or a garbage service who charge rates and charges just have to demonstrate that those rates and charges are related to the cost of service. And so as you change your rates and charges for a water utility, you have to notice it. You have to give the public an opportunity to protest. And if 50% plus one protest came in, you can't raise your rates. So there are changes in ownership will change kind of the governance over how rates and charges are set. And so we need to ask specific questions to attorneys who are good at this stuff so that we know what we're getting into.
Awesome. And I'm in the studio with Dave Stoldt, General Manager of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. I'm going to go here on a quick little detour for 2 announcements and a tiny bit of music. You're listening to Unquestionable. I'm Dan Wu, KZSE Santa Cruz, 831-459-4040 to make your voice heard on the station, talking about public versus private utilities, talking specifically about the purchase of Cal-Am Water's infrastructure in the Monterey Peninsula. And we'll be back in just a moment with more on all of that. Got a little bit of Do Make Say Think in the background here. The track 1978. Thank you so much to them. They've been around for a long time. If you like that track, look up Do Make Say Think. If you don't, just ignore everything I say. I don't even know why you're listening. I'm Dan Wu. This is KZSE Santa Cruz. Feeling spunky here on this January rainy morning. And we're back with the beginning of the winter quarter on KZSE. You can always hear my voice crack on the air Mondays, noon to 1. But you can also go to our website to check out any playlists, past shows that I've done. All of those playlists are up. The Rowdy Bunch, if you click on shows I've done and you see other DJs, you can click on playlists they've done and learn about the music, learn how you can find out more about our guests. You can also donate anytime, and your donations literally make it possible for us to have been doing this for 51 years. And I'm in the studio here with Dave Stoldt today from the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District, talking about their possible takeover of Cal American Water's infrastructure in the 6 cities, as he said, on the Monterey Peninsula. Now, county voters voted on this, but it only affects part of the county.
Well, it was not.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it was not countywide.
Right, that's what I'm wondering.
Limited only to voters within our political jurisdiction, which overlaps most of Cal-Am's water assets, but really only about 95% of their water revenues are in our jurisdiction.
So it showed up on the ballots of the 6 cities in that area, but not on just like Monterey County residents. So it didn't maybe have to convince people in an area of the county that isn't affected by their infrastructure.
Correct. Part of the unincorporated county, Pebble Beach and Carmel Valley, et cetera, but not King City. We did have some folks in the Toro area, which is kind of between Monterey and Salinas, saying, how's this going to affect me? How's this going to affect me? And we had to have an answer. And that's what makes this kind of interesting and complex all at the same time, because we're water-oriented, yet California American has both water assets and wastewater assets. And then we're kind of focused on our own jurisdiction, but as I mentioned, maybe 5% of their water assets are outside of that boundary. So we have to kind of figure out what's in the best interest of our constituents, those ratepayers.
Now, one thing that really stuck out to me when I was researching this is the desalination concept that in Santa Cruz, Monterey counties is thrown around a lot. We have Desal Alternatives up here as an anti-desalination group that's been very active for many years. But as far as I could see, the California Public Utilities Commission has approved a desalination plant for Marina. How is the Measure J activity going to affect that? And also, Marina's right in the middle of the bay. So how does that relate with the Santa Cruz County water supply, water infrastructure decisions that we make? And how much do you guys network with partners in other areas to communicate how changes might affect the other?
Yeah, let's start with the latter question and then work our way back to the desal. So Santa Cruz and Soquel Creek used to have the SC squared project. It was the proposed desal project. When that one went down, the citizens panel here in Santa Cruz has made various recommendations upon which the Santa Cruz City Council is supposed to act this calendar year. But basically, Santa Cruz is water short. Move to Soquel Creek. They're water short. They have an declared emergency, and they're working on developing resources and conservation strategies to deal with it. The Monterey County Water Resources Agency has 2 overdrafted aquifers that have seawater intrusion. The city of Marina and Marina Coast Water District wants to expand in the old Fort Ord area, and they're being challenged by a group called Landwatch over whether or not they actually have safe yield, that is, actual wet water, to meet the paper water requirements of their deal with the Army. So that's before you even get to the Monterey Peninsula.
You mean wet water versus paper water? You mean actual water versus water that's hypothetically written about in contracts?
Correct. So
Okay.
the contention in Old Fort Ord is that the Army's allocated, let's call it 6,600 acre feet for future development. The challenge, the environmental challenge, is there are groups saying, well, prove that the aquifers can actually support that number. And if you can't, then don't build a new development. So water is, it's not just life, it's lifeblood for economic development. So down on the peninsula, about 1/3 of our water supply comes from the ground. It got adjudicated in the courts. So the groundwater pumpers went to the courts and said, hey, I think one or more of us might be overpumping. Let's come up with a solution. So that's called an adjudication. And then 2/3 of our previous water came from the Carmel River. That was subject to a state order in 1995, followed up by a cease and desist order in 2009. So we're all trying to deal with these, but all of our problems are local. So Santa Cruz is going to deal with theirs, and we can just watch from the sidelines and vice versa.
Now, the cease and desist order, after being told to not pump as much from the Carmel River Valley, and I love there was an accidental pun in this history that I was reading about the aquifer. The seaside aquifer today has led to a slew of issues, including saltwater intrusion. It's really silly, but I liked that. This cease and desist order is from 2009, and it was saying that Cal-Am and the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District were both culpable of not abiding by limits on pumping from the Carmel River Valley. How do you guys see that, and what now is the effect of that order?
Right. It didn't determine that our district was culpable, but it kind of threw our district in with... So, in effect, by January 1, 2017, we were supposed to have all of the unlawful diversions from the Carmel River gone. Didn't make it. So in the extension that now carries us out to 2022, the district was included, as was an authority established by the mayors of the 6 cities and the company, saying that all of you collectively are going to meet these milestones and you're going to get a regional solution taken care of. And that if you fail to meet the milestones, if it's any one of your fault, then you're going to be held to it. So that's where we're at today.
And so if Measure J accomplishes its goal of taking over all the infrastructure from Cal-Am, and then there's orders like this, Monterey Peninsula Water Management District is going to have to then be responsible for any violations of those notices, and also may not know all the problems that they need to fix that Cal-Am Water is either not known to have or hasn't expressed, like, hey, this has been a problem, we've been thinking about fixing this, but now it's your problem.
Right. We inherit everything. So we inherit the order, and of course the proposed desal plant, $300 million desal plant, is the solution that Cal-Am put forward to solve this problem. So if it's built by the time the eminent domain process, again, assuming it's feasible and we go all the way through the courts, if it's built, then we would inherit a $300 million desal plant. The city of Marina...
That's not built or paid for yet.
Well, so that's the question. If it isn't built or paid for, then you have another bite at the apple. And I think that a lot of the proponents of Measure J also don't like the desal solution. And so they would like to use this as a cudgel to stop desal. But desal has been approved by the Public Utilities Commission. If the road is clear and they can move it forward, it'll probably be built before the eminent domain process is even concluded. So then it just becomes another one of the assets. Now, that being said, City of Marina and Marina Coast Water District filed writs or lawsuits to challenge the decision that allowed the desal plant to move forward. They're now currently trying to exhaust administrative remedies, is the phrase. And when those are exhausted, they are likely to refile their lawsuits. So we don't know the disposition of this desal plant legally.
Now, as the general manager of the water district, it's different than a board of directors, where you're not an elected official that comes and goes. How is it with your relations, and what's the dynamic between you and the board of directors? And how has that changed in the years that you've been the general manager? And how does it relate now with Measure J?
Yeah, great question. So I work for the board of directors, which is 5 elected by division in our service area, and then 2 appointed, one from the mayors and one from the county supervisors. So in effect, they're all elected one way or the other, and they establish policy. And I can tell you, with the passage of Measure J, the board itself also turned over. And I think appropriately so, in that we have a board who seems vested in solving the Measure J, what we call Rule 19.8, because it actually enacted a rule on our books. I guess the worst thing that could have happened is we would have a board who has more pro-Measure J members if the measure itself hadn't passed, because then every month or two, I'd be hearing, hey, we should look at this anyway, even though it didn't pass. And at least they're kind of in concert with each other at this point.
So what can people expect at the listening session tomorrow? Maybe give out that address and the location again for conversation on this. Oh, wait, but I'm going to put you on hold for 1 second with that, because we have a caller. Hello. Hello. You're on the air with KZSE.
Hello.
Hello. You have a godly echo. What's going on? Can nobody hear me? Anyways. All right.
Maybe it's a new phone line.
I don't know what's going on. I can hear them just fine. Just if you call in, I can hear you just fine. The listeners can hear you just fine. If you want to call in, 831-459-4040. Just turn off your radio, start talking. But yeah, going back to that, sorry.
So 6 p.m. Tuesday, January 15th at Sunset Center, Carpenter Hall in Carmel by the Sea. It's the 5th listening session, and basically these have all been attended by several board members.
We're going to try this again. Hello, you're on KZSE. Hello, you are on KZSE. I don't get it.
Yep.
They're there. All right, people. Just have some confidence. Just go for it. But yeah, it's attended by...
So several board members will attend. It will be run by the board member in that division. So in this case, it's Director Gary Hoffman from Carmel Valley. But chances are the new mayor, Dave Potter, will be there as well. And we'll have introductions, and then there'll be about a 15 to 20-minute overview of the process. What is in the initiative? How do you go about looking at basically the difference between feasible, doable, and desirable? They mean 3 different things. And desirable goes more to the kind of the public benefit, that future bench trial. Feasible goes to, well, should we do this anyway? Is there a ratepayer benefit? And doable just means, can we do it? Are there certain barriers to being successful? And so we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll look for feedback. And as I said, there's ranking sheets. There's a chance to talk and be heard.
Now, as a connected issue to this, Monterey and Santa Cruz and basically everywhere that's fun to live in California, and also all over the place right now, there's serious questions about housing. And how much do you guys, and building, so a lot of people say, oh, if you want to make housing affordable, you need to build a lot more housing. And then other people say, no, don't build housing because you're going to ruin the aesthetic of the place that we live in. I'm sure that a lot of your work relates to that issue as well. And how much are you involved in the conversations around building more housing in Monterey Peninsula? And what is the attitude currently of the district and the board of directors on that issue when you have things like saltwater intrusion and overtapping of water resources already?
Yeah, we're very supportive of additional affordable housing. One of the actually just completed, just opened, grand opening was an affordable housing complex in Monterey on city land. And we did a lot of creative structuring, little creative permitting to get the water available because we're a water scarce region. So we've got what we call water neutrality policies, where you can't build anything unless you can demonstrate where the water's coming from. And that water can only come from previously created savings, water that was documented to be used on the site beforehand, or an allocation of water from the little pocketbook of the city in which you're building. Now, almost all of the city general plans want to see more downtown housing, mixed use, commercial on the ground, housing up above. And most have policies that if there's 5 units or more, then you need a 20% set aside for affordable. So we totally support that, and we're trying to find ways to move more water to support those kind of developments.
Does Measure J and this new mission complicate any of those initiatives?
No.
Or does it make them better?
Well, the hard part is this concept of water from a jurisdictional allocation. We're one of the only places, and it's changing actually, but we're one of the only places that have told the land use organizations first, here's how much water you have to play with. In other parts of the state, it's always been, hey, we're building this and you need to find us more water. So it's a little bit of the opposite. The problem is with a limited supply, then we do need some new water supply to have water to allocate to these kind of projects. And so that's where the desal plant comes in or some other alternative to the desal plant. But at some point, California can't grow from 38 million people to 50 million people by 2050 without additional housing. So it's got to happen.
But does it? And in going back to the core of this issue about Measure J's passage and the election campaigning that happened last year on both sides, then when you mentioned Felton at the beginning, I'm going to bring this back to the beginning of our conversation about Felton and the Lompico Water District events that occurred. The Cal-Am officials in that case said that it was going to cost them $64 million to buy this water system for like 8,000 people at the time. I think it's like 13,000 now. And the people supporting the takeover said it was going to cost $2 million. It ended up costing about $12 million, largely due to lawsuits and litigation that they had to pay for because Cal-Am fought it and fought it and fought it. The actual purchase was much less than the $12 million, but the cost of carrying out the purchase was that much. So when they say that their infrastructure costs $1 billion for you guys, the campaigners for Takeover say it costs $200 million. How much more in the middle do you think that that's going to end up costing because of maybe Cal-Am's opposition to the event even happening?
Yeah, you went straight to the billion-dollar boogeyman. It was a number that was put out there to affect the campaign. It's not really believable. So it's going to end up somewhere in between. But yeah, there's going to be tens of millions of dollars that'll get spent in legal expenses and planning expenses and feasibility work and so forth, which is highly inefficient, if you will.
Now, they're not elected officials. It's a company. So can the district actually and pro Measure J board of directors, can they actually sway public opinion enough to maybe deter Cal-Am Water from carrying out litigation, or because it's their only tool to stop it, they don't really care?
Well, we'll see. And first off, we don't have a pro Measure J board.
Well, I meant members of the board that may personally be pro Measure J. That's all I mean.
Yeah,
yes.
But we do have a board who is firmly committed to carrying out the will of the people. So you got an initiative, great. Let's do it the best we can do it. So you don't have much control, and Felton ended up as a negotiation. Ojai's, they took over Golden State Water Company assets just not too far, like 2 years ago. That ended up in a negotiation. So we don't know where this is going to lead. Again, you have to prove that it's feasible before our board would even take the next steps. And let's say they chose to take those next steps because it is feasible. You could lose at the bench trial. You win at the bench trial, you keep going. Each of those stages comes with a pretty significant cost, but at any point along there, it could turn from an adversarial litigation to a negotiation. And negotiations by their nature are a little adversarial because they want to get the most they can get, and the buyer would want to get the least they can spend. But, that'll all prove itself out.
All right, and one last time before we go here, that listening session, it's the 5th of 5 listening sessions for the district where residents of Monterey Peninsula can go out to beautiful Carmel by the sea and hear or speak about their views, right?
Tell us what you think, and you don't have to live in that division. You can, if you missed one in Seaside a week ago, you can come out tonight. It's Carpenter Hall at Sunset Center, Carmel by the Sea, 6 o'clock, tomorrow, Tuesday.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dave Stoldt, General Manager of the Monterey Peninsula Water District. I'm Dan Wu. You've been listening to Unquestionable on KZSE Santa Cruz. Up next, I believe, is Pixelation Sensation, but if not, enjoy. I'm sure it'll be something that'll continue your enjoyment of this station or fix whatever I did to your day. Have a great time listening and whatever else you're doing on this rainy day. Have a good day.
Can't stay still, I'm weak, yes, I'm progress. Can't escape from myself.